This court is now in session. Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Triple F Podcast, Faith and Family First. You're listening on K-Light Radio 1040 AM and KESU FM Radio 94.6 on Kauai. Today, we are going to be going into the courtroom to talk about the Supreme Court nominations, what that means for you, and why you should stay plugged in. So, let's chat about that. Jim Hochberg, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you. Hi.
I notice you are very professional today, dressed up in your suit because and so am I. We're both in our suits today because we're doing our Supreme Court discussion.
We are.
Okay, so everybody over the last couple of weeks, Jim, have been watching as the hearings begin in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and as they start trying to get through this nomination, the name is out there, everybody's heard it. But there's some things that you and I would like to share with our listeners and viewers today about this process and maybe get your thoughts on that as an attorney that's licensed to practice right here in the state of Hawaii.
And I would love to do that because our viewers need to be the best informed people in the state of Hawaii. And that's what we want to do.
All right. So let's do like we always do. Let's paint the picture for them. So Justice Stephen Breyer, he had served 27 years on the Supreme Court. And on January 27th, 2022, he sent a letter to the President of the United States basically saying, and I quote, "I am writing to tell you that I have decided to retire from regular active judicial service as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States and to serve under the provisions," and he lists the provisions. "I intend this decision to take effect when the court rises for the summer recess this year, typically late June or early July, assuming that by then my successor has been nominated or confirmed." And if we go back to the time frame, we are talking about Biden, who nominated Ketanji Brown Jackson on February 25th, and the judiciary hearings, which will begin and may even be already in process as people are listening to this, by the Democrat Dick Durbin. Now, the other thing that I want people to understand is there are some people, and I know you feel very strongly about that, and we're going to get into that, that because Amy Coney Barrett only took a month from the day she was nominated to the day she was confirmed, they are hoping that the same process will happen for potential Justice Jackson, which means that if she was nominated by the president on
February 25th.
February 25th, that means by the end of March, she could be confirmed. So let's
if
get
she
your
gets
thoughts.
confirmed.
If she, okay.
And it's a very interesting if, because the Senate has to vote as a body, majority, which is 51, but there are 50 Republicans and there are 50 Democrats. If this evaluation of her goes strictly by party lines, so there's 54s and 50 nays, then the vice president, Harris, casts the deciding vote, and she becomes a Supreme Court justice by one vote, not of a sitting senator, but of the vice president, which is kind of interesting for one of those asterisks in history things where whenever she casts the deciding vote or writes the opinion in a case, the asterisk may be she barely made it. Okay?
Now, Jim, in a couple of shows ago, you made a statement that I didn't know. So I actually learned something from you. So I'm hoping that our listeners and our viewers will also learn this, that you do not have to be an attorney to be on the Supreme Court.
You don't have to be a judge or an attorney to be on the U.S. Supreme Court.
On the U.S. Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court is, we've had non-lawyer justices on the Supreme Court, political appointees that the president and the Senate put together the thing and they got on. Almost all of them, however, are either Harvard or Yale law graduates, interestingly enough. Not every single one, but through history, pretty much all of them.
Now,
but here's the interesting thing. when you look at, she's a judge on the Circuit Court of Appeals, Judge Jackson. Amy Coney Barrett was on the same court as an appellate judge. But Amy Coney Barrett was on that court for a very long time. Judge Jackson has only been on the court for a year because Biden nominated her to that position
Now, why
from
does
the
that?
district court.
Why should we care about that if anybody can become a Supreme Court
with
justice?
the 30-day scenario that you're putting out that Amy Coney Barrett got, so this lady should get the same thing. When you are an appellate court judge, you publish appellate opinions. When you are a trial judge, you rule on motions in trial court. Those are not opinions. Those are orders. And there's many or few or whatever. So Judge Jackson has only been an opinion writing appellate court judge for a year. So she doesn't have the same library of opinions and decision making on an appellate basis that Amy Coney Barrett did. That's point one.
And that's what the judiciary is going to be doing, supposedly, right? They're supposedly vet her, right?
The
Which
committee,
means
the Judiciary Committee.
Judiciary Committee in the Senate,
Right.
they're going to be asking her these questions and all of this. But the interesting thing is when you think about the process of somebody becoming a Supreme Court justice, you would think that every possible thing that could be done to make sure that the right person is sitting on the court is going to happen so that the right person gets elected to the court. But I can tell you what people are talking about. And I know I could see your wheels going, but people know that Justice Breyer was a liberal justice, strongly so. And she's just going to replace him. So there's not going to be a balance that the appointment of this potential Justice Jackson is going to have on the Supreme Court. But you have some very serious reservations about this process and this individual.
Well, okay, so before Judge Bork was nominated for the Supreme Court, and we got a whole new verb called being borked as a Supreme Court nominee, before that, Supreme Court nominees were judges, mostly on the appellate courts, who had shown themselves to be good judicial-minded thinkers.
And what does that mean?
That means that you neutrally evaluate the legal issue. You don't necessarily try to put your own desires into the result. And to be completely fair, I do think it did happen prior to Bork in the Warren court, but it was not in the nomination process. It was in the court deciding cases that came in. So by the time Judge Bork was nominated, the Democrats did not want a conservative social activist, so to speak. Although, to Judge Bork's credit, when he was interviewed at the time of his nomination, and he was asked if he could convince a majority of the court to roll back all of the judicial decisions that had been made from the liberal side during the Warren court, would he do it? And his answer was no, because it's wrong no matter what direction you're going. But anyway, so when you look at Judge Jackson becoming a Supreme Court justice now, she was selected because of her race, because of her gender. She was originally nominated by President Obama in, I think, 2008 as a federal trial judge. And he is the community organizer par excellence. Everything that he did as president was pushing the progressive agenda. She is one of those. She hated President Trump so much, she ruled against him every chance she got. A lot of her rulings were overturned by the appellate court.
And I think that's the things that we're hearing from people that oppose her nomination are talking about, number one, that she hasn't been in the position long enough to have enough rulings, like you said,
Correct.
in order to make these educated decisions. They also feel that because of her background and where she comes from, and you always want to know, right, the boards people sit on and all that kind of stuff, that she's been a supporter of Planned Parenthood. Like she's a pro-choice individual. So people on the life side are not going to like her decisions very much. But this goes to a point of an amicus brief.
So in 2001, there was a First Circuit Court of Appeals case, McGuire versus Riley. And this had to do with a statute in Massachusetts that created a floating 6-foot buffer zone around pedestrians and motor vehicles as they approached Planned Parenthood facilities, that demonstrators had to stay outside of that buffer zone. And the pro-life activists in Massachusetts sued to have it ruled unconstitutional because it infringed their First Amendment rights. The trial court ruled in their favor and enjoined the enforcement of the buffer zone. They couldn't have buffer zones. So it was appealed by the Planned Parenthood people, and in the appellate case, there was an amicus brief that now Judge Jackson, but then lawyer Jackson, helped write on behalf of the Planned Parenthood people. Now, here's the really interesting thing. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, ever. No tinfoil on my head, ever. But listen to this. So I researched that opinion, and it had the citation to that amicus brief on behalf of all of these Planned Parenthood women groups, blah, blah, blah. And usually the legal research product that I use in my law firm is LexisNexis. It has a competitor, Westlaw.
And the regular person cannot have access to that, right? You have to be
I don't know if you can go to the library at the Supreme Court and use it. I think you probably can. But the briefs filed in the cases, all the papers in the cases are usually available. So I wanted to pull up this amicus brief and read what it was she argued about why buffer zones are critically necessary to protect people at abortion clinics.
And amicus briefs aren't secret, like they can't hide them, can they?
No, they get filed in court. Well, here's the interesting thing. So I couldn't find the amicus brief in the electronic materials on my computer, through LexisNexis. So I called LexisNexis because I really wanted a copy of the brief. Very interesting. The guy that I talked to, and this was on February 27th, just weeks ago, he said that it's very interesting. The brief's not available. The only time documents in a case are not available is if the case is sealed.
And why would a case be sealed?
Well, like a family court case or a custody case.
So there are times that a court case can be sealed.
But it's the whole case is sealed, not just a part of it. And so I'm talking to the guy at LexisNexis, and he says, you know what? Nothing's available in this case. And he said that he would call the First Circuit and see if he could get access to it and call me back, and I haven't received anything by now.
So I would assume that there's a lot of people doing research on anything her name is on.
So here's the interesting thing. Is this brief not available because she's been nominated to the Supreme Court and they don't want us to see what her argument was when the floating buffer zone issue first came up 20 years ago?
Well, there was an interesting conversation that you and I had in regards to this, because when a regular person wants to get information on an individual, regular person, they will go to Wikipedia. And
Correct.
We know, teachers get crazy when their kids use Wikipedia because Wikipedia can be changed. People can go in there and make edits and all that. And when you went to the Wikipedia page on Judge Jackson, you were a little concerned by some of the stuff you saw.
There were like 400 changes in the month of February.
Prior to the nomination?
Most of them were after the nomination.
Okay,
but I went all the way to the beginning of the month just to see.
So teachers, make sure your kids are not using Wikipedia as a reference, because it may or may not even be an accurate thing, because anybody can make those changes. And we have an issue with that. But again, going back to her nomination, people had problems because that President Biden made it very clear from the beginning that he was only going to nominate a woman and a woman who was African American. He made that very clear. He wasn't going to steer from that. But that caused a lot of angst among people because they felt like that's discriminatory to do that.
Well, it is racial discrimination to all of the people who have been nominated. Merrick Garland, that's discriminating against him. He was nominated for the Supreme Court by President Obama. And if you remember, it was at the tail end of the last year of Obama's presidency after his second election. And the Senate was run by the Republicans, and they said, we're not going to hold hearings because we want the next president. It could be Hillary, it could be Trump, whoever it is, we'll let them do it.
Which gives me the opportunity to let you get on your soapbox for a while. One of the things that you go crazy about every time we do a show is people's responsibility to get out and vote. And I can tie this in by people that say, what does all this Supreme Court nomination have to do with me? Right? I mean, I don't have anything to do with who nominates them, which is true. The president of the United States nominates, but then the Senate actually confirms. So,
or doesn't.
So where does a human being in the United States of America, where does their right, like, how do they get involved in this process?
Okay, so in 2015, I think, maybe it was in 16, I was not a Donald Trump supporter for president. But when he gave us the list of judges that he would nominate for the U.S. Supreme Court, that is when I became a supporter of Donald Trump for president. Based on that list of, and if we got any of those guys on the court, or women, I would have been happy with him as president. And we actually got a lot more from him, which for me was just gravy, because my entire support for him was his judicial selection list.
And all three of his nominations
were on that list. Were good. They were all good.
People knew. So I guess what I'm saying is that people have a responsibility when you're making that vote for president of the United States and your senator. You are also playing a role in potential.
Yeah, as you
Supreme
always
Court.
say, when we vote for somebody, every time they vote on something, we're voting on something.
Yes.
So, yeah. So the question is, okay, so who is Ketanji Brown Jackson? Who is she? And she is quite an activist, actually. She's very progressive. She's very big government, unless it's Trump. She's very pro-abortion.
Well, Heritage President Kevin Roberts, he says, and this is a quote directly from him on her nomination, and we'll make this link available. He says that she's the most radical judge ever nominated for a seat on the Supreme Court. And he says that she has a record, quote, that reveals a deeply troubling pattern and raises questions about her ability to be fair and impartial.
Okay. You and I talked about this, and I told you I am a First Amendment advocate. I like doing constitutional litigation in federal and state court on behalf of the people of faith, Second Amendment people. I've done it with respect to voting rights. I have never wanted to be a judge because I can honestly say I feel so strongly about my position on those issues that I should not be the judge in those cases. And if you're going to be appointed a judge, you shouldn't be recusing yourself from cases because you feel passionate about them.
So what would you say?
I don't think she should be a judge either.
But then people were saying that about Amy Coney Barrett, though, because she was strongly pro-life. So does the argument go for her too then?
But when you look at her court decisions, it wasn't the same.
Okay.
When you look at my litigation record, it's the same as Jackson.
Well, let's just say and get on the record here that if Jim Hochberg ever was going to be appointed to something, and you know because you were on the Sexual Orientation and Law Commission right here in Hawaii, and you remember how that worked out.
Yeah, it was like the worst spiritual warfare I'd ever been in, actually, to tell you the truth.
But, but then, because again, you're admitting to the point that you are an activist. You're an activist.
I am very much an activist. It's my ministry.
Yeah. So maybe somebody should have recused themselves from being nominated if they believe.
Actually, they asked me to be on there because of my ministry. Speaker Suki asked me to be on that commission, knowing it was going to be 5 progressives that wanted same-sex marriage, and poor Tony Sheldon and I, as the traditional values people, trying to argue that marriage actually has a meaning, that changing the marriage partners changes the meaning of marriage. But we were quite successful. But there's another thing about Judge Jackson that I'd like to share if I can.
Go for it.
So there is available to anybody on the internet something called SCOTUS blog, SCOTUS being Supreme Court of the United States. And SCOTUS blog is scotusblog.com. It is a bunch of constitutional scholars that run a blog following what goes on day by day at the Supreme Court, what gets filed, what arguments get heard, what cases get accepted, what decisions get made. It's a really good source to go directly to the source for what's going on at the U.S. Supreme Court. So they have a profile of Ketanji Brown Jackson as a nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court. And I didn't know this fact about her. Let me share it.
Shall we give you a drum roll?
No. So, first of all, they say that her nomination for the D.C. Circuit, the First Circuit, which was last year, enjoyed support from lawyers of all ideological stripes. I didn't know that.
Okay.
But then they say that at her confirmation hearing in April of 2021, she faced questions about her service from 2010 to 2011 on the board of directors of the Montrose Christian School, a Maryland private school that has since closed. Well, maybe she didn't help too much.
Stop.
But she was on the board of a Christian school in Maryland. Interesting, huh? Senator Hawley noted that the school's statement of faith indicated that, quote, we should speak on behalf of the unborn and contend for the sanctity of all human life from conception to natural death, close quote.
Okay, you've got a lot of people cheering right now.
And
that's good.
That marriage should be limited to a man and a woman.
You've got people that are cheering on that
Hawley
too.
noted that Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett, had been attacked for serving on the board of a Christian school with similar positions, and he asked Jackson whether, based on her service at Montrose Christian, she believed in, quote, the principle and the constitutional right of religious liberty, close quote. So here's what she said. This is the interesting part. I do believe in religious liberty, Jackson told Hawley. It is, she said, a, quote, foundational tenet for our entire government, close quote. But then the story goes on. But Jackson distanced herself from the Montrose Christian statement of faith, telling Hawley that she had, quote, served on many boards, close quote, and did not, quote, necessarily agree with all of the statements that those boards might have in their materials.
Okay, can I just jump in real quick?
Wait a minute. No, she goes on. And in this case, she added, she was, quote, not aware of the statement of beliefs.
Okay, so I was just going to say that, for you listeners and viewers, if you're on a board, please know what it is the board is that you're representing, that you do agree. And if you don't agree with them, then get off the board. I'm so tired of people just not standing on what they believe. I mean, if you believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, or you believe that life is sacred, then make sure you're not serving on a board or raising money for people that are totally opposite to what you believe and what you stand for. So I'm sorry, that just drives me crazy, because some people just like their name on boards and commissions. And I'm not making, I want to be clear, I'm not saying this about Judge Jackson. I don't want to get nasty emails.
She said it about herself.
Well, I'm just saying that we have a responsibility as Christians to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that we are always above reproach, because that's what the Lord calls us to do.
There may be people that are Christians that are on boards, not because they want their name on the board, but because they actually haven't made the decision what their Christian worldview actually is in their living of their life. And Jesus actually talked about that. And if you think about the church of Laodicea, what comes to your mind?
The spitting up, the spitting out.
Because they were neither hot nor
were
cold.
lukewarm.
They were
Yes.
lukewarm.
Yes.
And Jesus spits them out of his mouth.
That's how some people feel about coffee, by the way.
But
coffee either has to be hot or cold to some people.
But as Christians watching our show, we really want you to understand what a Christian worldview is. Obviously, this judge who sat on the board of a Christian school that had a Christian worldview, she did not know what a Christian worldview is. And we need to know what it is, and we need to make sure if we claim one, that we live it.
And I think that's why there are a lot of organizations like the Alliance Defending Freedom, groups like theirs, that are very concerned about her nomination and potential confirmation, because there are going to be some religious freedom cases that are going to come before the Supreme Court.
Well, there's one right now on the website designer who didn't want to design websites for LGBT activist groups because of her Christian faith.
You know what?
And that's coming up this term in the U.S. Supreme Court.
I have some friends in the LGBT community because I love everybody, because that's what Christ calls me to do. And you know what they said? That if they were getting married and went to a Christian baker who didn't want to bake their cake, they would just go find another baker. Even they didn't see, like, why are you making this into an issue like this? But when you're talking to a member of the Supreme Court, they're going to end up making decisions that are going to affect all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
that was like, yes, you're right. Okay, so what more can you say? But this is what we're dealing with. We really appreciate all our listeners and viewers, our listeners on K-Light Radio 1040 AM and on KESU Radio FM 94.9. We also appreciate all our YouTube viewers and those who are just listening and watching us because they believe that Christ has given us a mandate to take our faith out into the community to change the world. That's why we do what we do.
That's why. And I want to go to Kauai and listen to our show on the radio.
Well, we want all the new listeners to make sure that you're supporting the radio stations. For you people in Kauai, make sure that you reach out to KESU and ask how you can partner with them to make it happen. And of course, 1040 AM, we love K-Light Radio. Contact Jake and tell him that Jim and Eva sent you and give him some support, because they're doing a lot of good work on the radio stations, getting out the word of God, and we appreciate it.
And what about Spotify now?
Oh, yeah, and you can listen to the show on Spotify, and we're going to be...
Is that listen or watch?
That's listen.
I've never been there.
No, Spotify.
I don't know.
Why are you asking me that?
I just thought of it.
You're so
This
funny.
is spontaneous.
I know, and see, I need to have...
I
things
don't
in
have
advance.
a teleprompter.
Oh, yeah, we don't. We're raw. We are so raw here. In fact, okay. No, all right. So make sure that you like this video and you share it with your friends. Comment. We really need to grow the show. We've got plans to do more. So if you want to sponsor the show, make sure you reach out to me at info@hawaiifamilyforum.org and say, hey, I want to sponsor the show. And I'll
actually say, can I see that really nifty sponsorship package thing?
And you see this wonderful mug, Triple F Podcast? You support our show and you'll get one of these, maybe two, depending,
And maybe one of these.
And one of these pocket constitutions. We want to make sure that you get that. So again, reach out to me. And as always, you can reach out to Jim at jameshochberglaw.com if you want to ask him anything. And Jim's pretty good that if you have anything that you want to know. But anyway, make sure you stay plugged in, because on the next show, we're going to talk about the bills that have survived in the Hawaii State Legislature, the ones that are still moving, and how you can maybe get involved in those. So stay plugged in. And we will see you next week.
Don't touch my gavel. Do not touch my gavel.
This court is adjourned.